5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting live from the Newsmax studio in New York City. A fusion of politics, commentary, entertainment, and sports. Steve and his team bring you the latest news and opinion now. Here is Steve Malzberg.
All right, folks, as John Bachman mentioned, the president's speaking as we speak, taking questions. Joining us now is Ari Fleischer, former White House spokesman for President George W. Bush. Hello, sir.
Steve, great to be with you.
Always great to talk to you. I look forward to it. And let me just catch you up a little bit on what the president has said and catch the folks up as well. On the Middle East, he blamed Hamas for violating the ceasefire. No question, because every news report I've heard all day long on every outlet says, well, you know, Hamas says Israel broke it. Who cares what Hamas says? Number two, this disturbs me. While he called for the release of the soldier unconditionally, generally he said, while we defend Israel's right, that, you know, there's always a but he went on to say it's hard to reconcile Israel's right to defend itself by going after the tunnels and stopping the rockets with our concern for the Palestinian civilians. Is that the proper way to phrase it, that it's hard to, should it be hard for the president of the free world to reconcile Israel's right to defend itself with what the results of a war are?
You know, I guess it's hard to reconcile, that means you're open to the possibility of the tunnels never getting shut and the tunnels still existing into the sovereign territory of Israel for more kidnappings and killings. You know, it's an either or. And I think the only right thing to do is to say that America is morally on the side of those who are preserving peace, trying to fight for peace, and that it's Israeli civilians who are under threat, and the United States stands with Israel.
Yeah, that would have certainly been the right thing to say, absolutely. Let me ask you about the media coverage. And Ari, you know, you've been there. I forget when the alleged Jenin massacre happened, but we could go back to the Jenin massacre, which never happened. We could go back to the fake Palestinian funerals where we've had video of the bomb, not now, but in past, with the bodies getting up and walking away, with the kids,
right.
The same kids going into ambulances twice or three times and then getting up and going in again. I'm not saying that people aren't dying here, but when I hear that Hamas has now been accepted as a legitimate entity by the media, their spokespeople, their videos that they put out, without question, and it's given as much weight, if not more, than Israel's claims and statistics, I'm dumbfounded.
They've always been like that. Steve, the thing about the media is they like to put themselves, quote-unquote, in the middle of whatever it is they cover and tell people what both quote-unquote sides say. And that leads to an equalization of those who act morally and those who act immorally. And I think the great thing, though, is most Americans see through that. Most Americans remain strong pro-Israel supporters, and they do so because they know that Israel is much like the United States. And they know that if there were tunnels built into the United States and rockets fired on the United States, they know what they would want our government to do, and they support Israel doing it. So I'm not going to make excuses for the press. I've just seen it for so long, I stopped arguing with them about it, and I just take solace in the fact that the American people see things differently.
Yeah, that certainly is a bright spot. That's absolutely true. George W. Bush, you know, was I think the first president to call for Israel to be recognized as a Jewish state. I think I could, in my mind's eye, I see him with Sharon and the King of Jordan and whoever the Palestinian leader was at the time, somewhere, maybe it was in Jordan, and I believe he called for it right there. And for this administration, and this is going back a while already, Kerry to testify before Congress and say, you know, that's no big deal if they officially, say it because Arafat once said he did, and, you know, I think they're making too much of it. That's just one example, as you well know. What is going on here in this administration's stance towards Israel?
Well, I think from the moment President Obama took office, he always wanted to be the man in the middle himself. You know, with the vehemence in which he criticized Israel for Israel's housing policies, his Cairo speech, the president's instructions on the Cairo speech was he wanted his words to be heard through Arab ears. You know, I think he worked so hard to put himself in a spot that most American presidents have not put themselves into, which is square in the middle, that he's alienated both sides. The other real issue here, which President Obama is missing, is there's a changing Middle East underway in which Saudi Arabia and Jordan and Egypt are on the side, basically, of Israel and what Israel is doing with Hamas. They do not support Hamas. They support the Palestinian people. But that is a far cry from the terrorists, the thugs who have taken over in Gaza for Hamas. And instead, the president's allied himself with Hamas's demands for the ceasefire, as explained by Qatar. The Middle East is realigning, and President Obama is missing the boat. That's what's hard to understand as well with Secretary Kerry and the ceasefire terms that he announced. I mean, can you imagine that Egypt was sponsor of a more Israel-friendly ceasefire than John Kerry and the United States?
It is amazing. And Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, they've all kept their mouths shut because they would all love to see Hamas get the heck out of there. And if Israel could do the dirty work for them, all the better.
We have to dwell on that, because the reason that there's been this sea change is they recognize one of the gravest threats to their own security is radical Islam.
Absolutely.
And the practitioners of radical Islam are Hamas, Hezbollah, the Iranian proxies. This is the new Middle East. And I don't understand why strategically President Obama is missing this chance for a wonderful and fundamental realignment which unites Arabs and Israelis.
Good question. One more on this Gaza issue. Hillary Clinton gave well, she was being interviewed, and she made a statement about the Israeli civilian, the death toll in Gaza, and Hamas hiding weapons in civilian areas. Very curious answer to me, which not much media attention has been given to it, but I have a sharp ear for these things. Let's listen to this.
The problem is, and this is something, I'm not a military planner, but Hamas puts its missiles, its rockets in civilian areas. Part of it is that Gaza is pretty small and it's very densely populated. They put their command and control of Hamas military leaders in those civilian areas. Israel, I know, has sent warnings and tried to get people to move. But in any kind of conflict, there are going to be civilian casualties, and we need to try to get to a ceasefire as soon as possible.
Well, first of all, the ceasefire as soon as possible is the American stance, which, of course, is bad for Israel. But, part of the problem is Gaza's so small. That's why Hamas puts their rockets and stuff in, it's almost like they're forced to do it, she's saying.
Right.
That kind of bothered me.
It's another sacrifice of moral clarity. It's against the rules of law, rules of war. And the rules of war don't acknowledge whether a space is small, medium, or large. It's immoral. You don't put your missiles, your weapons in mosques, schools, and hospitals. If you do, you, by the definition of the rules of war, have turned those facilities into legitimate targets. She should not temporize on that one bit.
All right, let's move on quickly to what else Obama said today about, first of all, the economy. It's great, but he talked about immigration reform. He's talking about the bill being debated in the House right now for the temporary border fix there for the kids, and says they're debating the most extreme and version of the bill. It would never pass the Senate, and if it did, I would veto it. Then he went on to talk about while they're on vacation, he's talking about immigration reform in general, while they're on vacation, I'll have to make tough choices with or without them. Again, telegraphing that he's going to sign this amnesty for illegal immigrants.
Yeah, well, look, I have not criticized President Obama for taking vacations, but I do find a little irony in the fact that he would use those words. Look, immigration reform is one where I see very strongly two sides of it. On the one hand, America has always been a welcoming nation, and the fact that children are trying to come here to have a better way of life, there should be no other nation they want to come to other than America. But we still have to find a way for it to be done within the law, because what makes us a great nation is respect for the law. I still hope a compromise can emerge. I just think it's so important that we have an immigration system that functions, that works. And we could use the workers. We could use the young people coming to this country. We have a demographic time bomb underway in America where we're not going to have enough workers to support baby boomers once they retire. There's a lot to be said for a successful immigration reform. And I think everybody's going to have to give a little and compromise on this one.
All right, I want you to hear something. Derek Jeter was in Texas, Arlington, his final game with the Yankees in Texas against the Rangers. And before the game, of course, his farewell tour, the usual ceremony, except this wasn't the usual ceremony. Everybody watch and you listen, Ari, to this.
And he's wearing his bulletproof jacket, and he's getting his arm loose. And Derek Jeter comes up to him.
Hey, Prez, how are you doing? Good, Derek. That's good luck tonight. Thank you, sir. He said, "Say, I hear you're throwing out the first ball."
So I just asked him if he was going to be throwing the first pitch from the mound or in front of the mound.
The president said, I think I'll throw from the base of the mound. Jeter said, "I want to do that if I were you, Mr. President."
And I told him, you better throw it from the mound, otherwise you're going to get booed. I said, this is Yankee Stadium.
He said, "Okay, I'll throw from the mound." And he's walking out, and he looks over his shoulder, and he says, "Don't bounce it. They'll boo you."
President Bush is standing out there like a brick wall. I'm not afraid of terrorists. I'm going to stand all out here. I'm going to give you a thumbs up, and I'm going to throw a strike.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 43rd President of the United States of America, George W. Bush.
And you couldn't see it, Ari, but of course the first part was reminiscing about when he threw out the first pitch at the World Series game and what Jeter had told him, and then that last part was him being introduced, the president that is, at the Texas Rangers game where he gave a special gift to Derek Jeter. We got about less than a minute left, but that must bring a little chill to you.
I still get a shiver down my spine. That was one of the best documentaries ever put together. 9 innings, I think it was called 9 innings from ground zero.
Yep.
And it was chilling, it was moving, it was riveting, and that Jeter moment captured so much of it. And then the president threw that high heat, that perfect strike.
Oh, that was
right
a perfect strike. Perfect.
And then that event in Arlington last night with Jeter. You know, for the president to be reunited with Jeter and Jeter to be there. And Steve, I got to tell you, when I hear the roar of the crowd when George W. Bush is named like that, it sure does feel good.
Yep, it brings a tear to my eye, Ari. Hey, thank you, sir, and we'll speak to you soon. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for having me.
Ari Fleischer, folks. We're coming back next with the panel.